Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Trumais, Peirik Dalit, Halacha Gimel. We're learning today Daf Lamed Hey. We are starting with the Mishnah 3 lines from the top of the Amid, and even though we quoted this Mishnah many times, this Mishnah will be presenting the 3 possible measures of Truma, based on the rule that Mida Oidaisa, there isn't a minimum amount required. Even one little grain will exempt an entire pile of 1,000,000 sa from it being tevel, but that's only midoiraisa. But midrabanan, the Chachamim gave, as we keep on repeating, 3 different types of shiurim: the ayin ra'ah, the ayin yafa, and the beinanis. Right, the stingy, the generous, the average. And what we're going to learn new that we did not learn until now is that those shiurim are in itself subject to a machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Our Mishnah will only mention the shita of Beis Shammai ba'ayin yafa, which is not the 1 of 40 that we keep on repeating. That's the halacha. Beis Shammai holds that the generous should give 1 from 30, a greater amount, a larger amount. But the Mishnah does not mention shitas Beis Shammai, not by beinanis and not by ayin ra. That's something that the Gemara is going to introduce. But the main point of the Mishnah will be the following: that even though we have the generous donation, whether it is the way we paskin 1 from 40, whether it is keshitas Beis Shammai 1 from 30, if a person chooses to be even more generous, zum gesund, that's good, it works. Question will be, what happens if when a person separated the truma, they didn't even give the minimum? Let's go with our shita, with Beis Hillel, that the minimum, that even the stingy has to give at least 1 from 60. What happens if when someone separated the truma, they didn't even give the 1 from 60? So as we will see, they have to give to compensate. They have to make a second giving. This is very unlike the topic that we began this Pedic with, that a person from the outset had in mind to give the right amount. It's just like they didn't do it at the same time. That was the sugya that we had before. Now we're going to learn a whole different thing. You want to give at one go all that you need to give, but what you took was too little, and the consequence of it, and the obligation because of it. The second step that you'll have to make, and ultimately at the end of today's daf, we're going to learn something that, as it's positioned in the Yerushalmi, is really very different from the way this is spoken about in Bavli. In Bavli, whether it's Masechta Tainas Daf Tes and in other places, right, there is a Chazal that learns from the words Ased, Ta'ased, Parshas Re'eh. What's the double expression? So Chazal tell us that Ased Bishvil Shetes Ased, which means that if a person properly gives the tithes, they're actually going to become wealthy. Here in the Yerushalmi, we have a different presentation of this topic, and that is, as the Gemara says, that a person who properly takes off all of the tithes, that person's principal will always return to its former value. In other words, the Yerushalmi doesn't say, you'll become wealthy, but whatever a person gives because of the mitzvah of giving trumais umaisres, that even though begashmiyas, you're taking off 2%, then you're taking off 10%, then you're taking off 10%. Well, you diminished your pile. Your pile will return to the way it was before, as we will see in our sugya. So Chevra Daf Lamed Hey, all the way on top, 3 lines from the top by the Mishnah, says the Mishnah, what's the share of truma? So the answer is ayin yafa. If a person wants to give a generous donation, what the quantity should be, echad me'arboyim, 1 of 40. And what's very important to know is that this does not represent an absolute upper limit. It's not pshat that you're not allowed to give more than 1 in 40. And if you were to do it, it would be ineffective. That's not the pshat. A person can give more than that. You cannot give it all. Don't forget, Chavre, we already spoke it out. The more you give to the kohen, the less the Levi is getting. Which one might have thought, maybe the Chazal said, you want to be generous, or good for you, give 1 from 40, but don't give more. Because the Ma'aser Rishon is only given, like exact, from that which remained after you gave the Truma. From the Truma, the kohen gives nothing to the Levi. Nevertheless, just remember that, because we're going to have a Mishnah about that later. You can give more. But if a person says, on the other hand, I know I'm going to give more, but the more I give to Truma, the less I'm giving to the Levi, the less I'm giving to the Ani. So Chazal tell us, if you want to be generous, give 1 from 40. Of them, Beis Shammai Oimrim, no. Generous is even more than that. Ayin Yafa is Echad Mishloishim. Okay, back to the Tanakama. That's the way we're learning Pshat in the Mishnah. That the Habeinanis, no, if generous is 1 from 40, not Beishamai, then the Beinin is the average person should approximate Mechamishim. Mechamishim means 1 from 50, what we call 2%. And Vahara means someone who has an ayin ra, which is the way Chazal speak about someone who's miserly. It's interesting. We call someone who's a kaptzan a bad eye. A bad eye. Ayin hara. You're right. Oh, I'm afraid of ayin hara. Technically, ayin hara means a stingy person. That person should give, says the Mishnah, mishishim. Now, unlike the echad me'arboim, this is important, where the echad me'arboim is not the max upper limit. You can give more. Beis Shammai says you should give more. Echad mishloishim. If a guy says, I want to give echad mi'esrim, if a guy says, I want to give 10%, it's going to be effective. Even though it means that your pile will diminish, the Levi will really get a lot less, it's effective. By the minimum share, which is according to the let's say Beis Hillel, or according to the way it's accepted, that the minimum share is 1 from 60, this is the absolute minimum. This is very important. Look inside the Rashi Ilio. 4 lines from the bottom, and he makes the following point, that Habeinin is Mechamishim, V'hara Mishishim, says the Rash, that Asa on this liner only follows the Tanakama. The Ilu Beis Shammai. Again, the Rash is saying something that we're going to learn sooner in the Gemara. In the Mishnah, Rabbeinu HaKadosh quoted Beis Shammai only in part, for whatever reason. The Ayin Toiva is Echad Mishloishim. According to Beis Shammai, the Beinanis is Me'arboim. You got it? So in other words, that what for us is the average, LeBeis Shammai, what for us is the generous, LeBeis Shammai is the average, and the Ayin Ra is Mechamishim. In other words, everything is down 10. We say 40, 50, 60. Beis Shammai in the Mishnah says generous is 1 of 30. So the other 2 is down 1. 1 of 30, 1 of 40, 1 of 50. And v'hachi tanya b'toisefta, where does the Rash get it from? Befedish. Shir truma, Beis Shammai yoimrim ayin yafa mishloishim, v'habein nismar boyim, v'hara mishishim. Atkan, end of court of the Tosefta. V'loichash hatana limisnaya l'chuura. Because Beis Shammai b'makim Beis Hillel ain't a Mishnah, and I know we're playing the game on both sides. So oy bazoi, don't quote Beis Shammai, just to make it clear. Beis Shammai b'makim Beis Hillel is not a Mishnah meaning halacha l'maisa. You're kidding? You learn Mishnayos. The Mishnayos is filled with arguments between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. If a person makes birchas haTorah and they only learn Beis Shammai, they did their mitzvah. But nevertheless, Rabbi minimized with the presumption that we will know it's somehow in the echad mishloishim that everything goes down 10, even LeBeis Shammai. Okay, and now, like we mentioned, I can give more than the generous. I cannot give less than the stingy. So what happens if taram va'ala b'yadei echad mishishim? So if the normal, I took truma, and what did I approximate? The minimum amount is sum gesund. Truma ve'einer tzarich litraim. Now, why does the Mishnah even have to write that? Why do you think? Because l'chayra, we're speaking about a person that gives more than the stingy. That means even if there's a person that gives the average, even if there's a person that in the past, in his behavior, he gave the generous, he gave 1 from 40. Nevertheless, if right now he says, I'm taking this, and it turns out what he took was 1 from 60, we don't say he already established himself as the Groise Nadiv, and now you have to bring it from 1 of 60 to 1 of 40. That we don't say. As long as, if what you took, your kavana was, this is it, unlike the first Mishnah in the Spedic, where you intended lechatchila to take the right amount, you just took it in parts. Here I'm saying, this is what I'm taking, even if in the past I was a generous, if I hit the minimum amount, then truma, meaning ve'einer tzarech litraim, I don't have to add anything additional. However, now, what happens if nevertheless, chazar v'hoisif, if he did add, so you should know the way Rabbi writes that which you added is ineffective. Again, Rabbi would have written it doesn't write it. The way he writes it is, He's giving you the reason. The addition is chayiv b'maisris. In other words, since the full measure of truma has been taken, even though on the most minimum level, therefore, what happens, Aviv, when you remove truma, everything else is misukan. Something that's misukan can never become truma. It's already misukan. Only tevel can become truma. Compounded with the fact that when we say the words misukan, which means fixed, it's not mamish misukan. Misukan from truma. But that which is misukan from truman is chayiv in meiser. So if I added whatever amount, another apple, you can't make it truma. The way Rabbi says it is that apple has to have from it meiser removed. Don't forget, you don't have to give everything to the Levi, but you have to give 10% from that which is misukin from truma. 10% of the misukin from truma has to go to meiser addition. So Rabbi writes chayiv meisers. And okay, so that's that. Now you want to give the kohen a gift zum gesund, but that's not truma. There's no kedusha there. But you have to remove meiser from it. And by the way, meiser doesn't only mean meiser addition, and then from what remained, you have to remove meiser sheni or meiser ani. But medvaram amurim is that if when you made your removal, even though it wasn't as generous as your norm, you got the minimum amount. What were to happen if I made a removal and I didn't even get the minimum amount? So says the Mishnah, Allah biyadei mishishim ve'echad. It's as if the Mishnah wrote, echad mishishim ve'echad. I know we shouldn't get confused. The bigger the number is not the bigger. It gets smaller. 1 of 60, right? 1 of 40. 1 of 40 is more than 1 of 60. Instead of you giving 1 from 60, it came out, you gave 1 from 61. In other words, you didn't even hit the minimum amount. So first of all, we don't say this guy was aiming to give 1 of 60. He didn't get it. So what he did is nothing. We don't say that. But what we say is it's not completed. So that which you remove, step number one is truma. Gavaldik.
What's the difference between not completed to not doing it? At the end of the day,
sure,
it's not done.
Doing it means that it's still tevel, and I put it back in the pile and I do it again. Truma means that which you separated was effective enough that it is imbued with kedushas truma, but the pile is not yet mesuken, and therefore v'yachzor v'yitroim k'moy shehu lamud. Now you have to give. Now Mishnah writes something amazing. We keep on saying this rule. Meiser, the Mishnah says, al tarbala aseru madis. Truma dafkin not exact. We learned that before. Truma has to be given by approximation. Aber, not in this case anymore. When I gave my first separation by approximation, but I didn't hit not even the minimum amount. Now I have to take the compensation. I have to fill it up. Says Rebbe, now the second has to be done exact. Meaning, if I'm a person that by average I would give the average, I gave echad mechamishim, I took off and it comes out, now post facto, it was only 1 from 61. So how much more am I planning if I want to go back to my average? I love Vlad is sweating. Vlad is not even sweating. He's good at this. What's the percent? I don't know. 1 of 61. I want to go from 1 of 61 to 1 of 50. So something. So that's something I could, not I have to. That's something I could give exact. It's approximation only works if I'm making one separation. Now that I'm obligated to hit the minimum amount, now you have to make the cheshbon. That's the meaning. Now, what is the cheshbon?
Just learn the Deraisa, giving 1 grade is enough.
So Vlad is pointing out something amazing, which is a big chiddush, which is that one would have argued that since midai Raisa, one drop from everything is enough, how can you say he has to give it again? That's the koyach of the chachamim, which is amazing. We don't always say that. That since Chazal said l'shitaseinu l'tanakama that the minimum is echad mishishim, you didn't even hit the minimum rabbinic obligation. You have to get to the minimum rabbinic obligation, to the point that we don't say it's misukin. No, you separate it. And this second separation will be done b'mida or b'mishkal or b'minyan. Look inside that Asher Ilyo, 7 lines from the top on the left column. This is good. This is a good thing. It's good that we came today just for this. B'mida b'mishkal or b'minyan, the af al gav the ein toirmin truma gedoyla. Even though truma gedoyla in principle should not be given, not b'mida, not b'mishkal, not b'minyan. Kidetran b'peirik kama in our pagination daf yud beis. Nevertheless, oisoi moise shuhu toirem, this additional that the Mishnah says that you have to separate for truma. When you're going from the percent of 1 from 61, and now you have to add to hit the 2%. If I'm giving a echad b'chamishim, that, not that you're obligated, but you are allowed to give that not by approximation. Because the guy says, okay, I'm off. So to be on, let me cheshbon. Let me find out. You sharelei litroim b'mida u'b'mishkol u'b'minyan. Deloy, we're skipping the parentheses. We're going to the brackets. Deloy amru litroy mu'umed. When did Chazal say you dafka have to give it only by approximation? That's ella ikar truma. However, so 1 second. So the Mishnah is already telling you this compensatory second separation of trumos could be given already by exact. So it's not following the rules. The general rules. One might have thought that if this is not following the general rules, maybe I don't have to follow another general rule, which is that truma lechatchila should be given min hamukav. Says the Asher Ilyo umikol makom Tana de Masnisin. Our Tana holds that even though you are already separating truma, not the normal way, matzrich miya mukav, but the min hamukav you have to still do. Like all other truma. No, it's the only difference between the second compensatory separation to the general rule is only the din of mu'umed or exact. However, let's finish reading in the Asher Ilyo. Rabbi Yehuda, just to understand what we're going to have in the Mishnah in a moment, he argues with the Tanakama and he holds the afilu mukif loy tzarech. Once you're making a second separation, not only does it not follow the rule of mu'umed, but if you want, you can give it exact. You also don't have to give it min hamukaf. And by the way, why does that make sense to us? Of course, it makes sense to us because we linked a couple of daf back the din of min hamukaf to the din of approximation. That's how we learned. My sedition, we learned in our Gemara, does not need the min hamukaf. Why not? Faket, because since you're giving it by exact, why do you have to do it min hamukaf? Count. You have 10 apples here, you have 20 apples there. You know exactly what you have. You're making a count. You're going to give a sum total of 10%. We don't need min hamukaf. The whole din of min hamukaf is only because you're giving by approximation. So Rabbi Yehuda says, so go all the way. Once you don't need by approximation, once it's mutter to give b'mida u'b'mishkal u'b'minyan, then let's read into Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer afli min hamukaf, which makes a lot of sense. Now the Tanakama also makes sense. First of all, the compensatory separation doesn't have to be b'mida b'mishkal u'b'minyan. See, if it would have to be, then there's a greater svara to say, how can the Tanakama even argue with Rabbi Yehuda? Why would you need min hamukaf? The answer is Latanakama, because you don't have to give it exact. Point is that you have to compensate. When you give more, you don't deduct. More is more. But the minimum amount is an absolute shear. Lesser than that, the Chachamim says you have to. I just want to say one more thing to what Vlad said over here. L'chura, that since what you gave, whatever that was, did do a tikkun midoraisa, l'chayra, what you're separating to compensate is a rabbinic separation. And we already learned the two dinim, that if you have a truma midrabanan, then number one, it doesn't create meduma, right? In other words, it's batal b'roiv. You don't need the share of 100 to 1. And also, if a non-kohen ate it, they don't pay the chaimish. L'chayra, that's the rule here also. The Mishnah doesn't say it already, he said it before. What we're going to have to most of today's daf, it's a very easy daf. We're going to have something that's called a asmachta. I want to make it clear. We are following all of the shiurim in the Mishnah's midrabanan. Whenever you have rabbinic shiurim and you're looking for a source anywhere in Tanakh, not only if it's coming from Divrei Torah, from Chamisha Chumsha Torah, even if it's coming from the Vim and Ksuvim, that cannot be the source. It's something, by the way, rabbinic and divrei neviim are not on the same level. You know, divrei neviim, as pasuk in Yeshayahu, right? We keep Shabbos. Is that to be mechabed Shabbos, to be ma'anek Shabbos, koved Shabbos and oinik Shabbos is taka not biblical, but it's medivrei. It's neviim. It's called medivrei Kabbalah, and those verses are not an asmachta. The source is the pasuk in Yeshayahu. What we're going to be learning right now is not even that. It's a rabbinic law, and we're going to be using various psukim. Some of them will be in Nach, some of them will be in the Chumash, just to make it clear. This is what we call an asmachta ba'alma. We're not minimizing an asmachta. The Chazal always made an effort to find a link, a remez, something in Scripture on which we lean the rabbinic law, but it's a rabbinic law. And just also, al pi Chasidus, divrei soifrim comes from a higher source from divrei Torah, which is mamash awesome. Chavivim divrei soifrim, chamurim divrei soifrim. Not because our attitude is that we love it more because we brought this to God. No, it's much deeper than that. Is that the shoyrish of divrei soifrim is much higher. But be that as it may, what we're learning now is just asmachtas. So let's begin. Now, all of this is based on a pasuk. If you want to read the whole pasuk, it's gavaldik. Look in the Torah Oyer HaShalom, and I'm going to quote now the chapter and verse, because there's going to be various psukim from Yecheskel, not to confuse one from the other. This is Yecheskel, Mem Hey, Yud Gimel. Lahavdil. I don't know why the Goyim like quoting the Pedic and the verse. So I'm not that familiar with us doing that for whatever reason, but here we have to do that. So Yecheskel, Mem Hey, Yud Gimel writes, Zoi Satruma Asher Torimu. The pshat of the pasuk, I just want people to know, that pasuk in Yecheskel, it's beautiful. It's not speaking about Truma Gedoyla. That pasuk is speaking about that in the third Beis HaMikdash. It may be built today. When Mashiach is coming, just like when we inaugurated the Mishkan, the Torah writes, the whole big to-do for 12 days, there was a whole Chanukah Sabayis. Just like throughout history, by Shlomo HaMelech, by Bayis Rishon, even not only when we built the Bayis Sheni, even during the Bayis Sheni after the miracle of Hanukkah, there was a Chanukah Sabayis. There's going to be a special, unusual ceremony, celebration, in which one-of-a-kind korbanos will be brought, not the normal korbanos, as we had in the beginning. This, in Yecheskel, this pasuk is speaking about that which we will bring when the third Beis HaMikdash is going to be built, in its celebration of a Chanukah Sabayis, including in the many gifts will be mincha offerings. That's what the pasuk is talking about. And the pasuk writes, how much will be given? So that's the Zois HaTruma, just for the record. The Truma in this pasuk is not Truma Gedoyla, but that's the pshat. We are learning Gemara now. We're making an asmachta. So we're going to say that let's learn a drasha that Truma means Truma. Now, what are the measurements that Yecheskel saw b'nevuah of what we will bring? So we can read it inside. You don't have to read in the Torah, or read it in the Gemara now. Shishis ha'efer mechomer hachitim, that we're going to be giving 1/6 of an ephah from the amount of a chomer of wheat, and the shisem. Now, Iran is here. You tell me in modern Hebrew, what's shisem? So we're going to teach, this is the way we're teaching it. Shishis is a 6th. Mem, many times will make a word from singular to plural. So we're going to, now, this is not the pshat, maybe this is the pshat. We're learning a whole drasha here. Shishisa means 2/6. That 2 and 2/6 from an ephah will be given from a chomer of barley. Now, just to go to make the numbers for the
just that in Hebrew it would have been shish.
Well, no, I can't hear you. Can you one more time? Yeah, thank you. A third. Yeah,
just that in modern Hebrew it would have been shishiyot.
Shishiyot. No, Baruch Hashem, that there's lashon kodesh, luchud, evrit. It's something else. There's evrit. There's English. This now we're reading now God's the holy tongue. That ephah contains 3 saw. Guys, an ephah contains 3 saw. There are 10 saw. I'm sorry, there are 10 ephah in a chomer. Vlad is I see Vlad's eyes going like this. I know he's making the cheshbonos. A 1/6 of an ephah is a half a saw. And that is A sixth of an ephah is a 60th of a chaimer. So in other words, now the problem is that the pasuk is writing two shiurim. We're writing about giving a 60th. When you're giving wheat, we're going to be giving, the mincha will be from a 60th of from what we will have. We're going to gift it to God. But then when we speak about 2 60th, shkoyach, a 30th, be'erach a 30th from barley. So here you have, at least in the pasuk, the shiur, these two shiurim. In other words, either a 30th of a chaimer or a 60th of a chaimer. Now, turning to Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis. Yachol toidim bechitim echad mishishim. Let's go all the way with the asmachta. Maybe God is saying that when it comes to chitim, what is the right shear? Now we're going to truma, not to the gift in the inauguration that you should give out from wheat. You give a 60th, which is what we call the ayin ra. And and when you're giving barley for whatever reason, you should give echad mishloishim. That will be the right girsa. That cannot be. That's vaday not. Why is that for sure not? Because since it says, and again we're quoting a pasuk in Yecheskel, but this is mem dalid lamed, and you can look inside the Torah Oyer Hashalim. Vereish is called bikurei koil, and v'chol trumas koil, mekol trumaisechem lakoy hanamiyah. Oh, that pasuk is talking speaking about truma, and the Torah writes these words that v'chol trumas koil, and all of the truma from all produce. From all produce, we're putting all the produce together. From that, we already know shiyu kolat trumay shavais, that there is no such a thing that the quantity, the percent from every product is subject to if it's wheat, one share, barley, another share, vaday loy. So now I got a problem. So what does it mean if we're linking not the fact of how much we will give during the Chanukah Sabayis, but when we're speaking about actually Truma Gedoyla, what? From wheat, 1/60th of a chaimer. And from barley, 1/30th, that can't be because it has to be the same thing. So for that, this is a Shmuel. Shmuel says, let me tell you what God is telling you. This is called speaking straight. Add a 60th, 1/6 of an ephah, 1/6 of slichad, a 1/60th of the chaimer. But add, the Torah says a 6th. If you put a 6 together with 2/6, how much do you have? So you have a half of an ephah. Thank you. A half of an ephah will rectify 2 chaimer because there's a chaimer of wheat and a chaimer of barley. Put it all together and make it an average. So if you put a half a chaimer, you have to see Vlad's face. He's the only one doing the math. See, we're relying on the Gemara. A half a chaimer, a half a ephah from 2 chaimers is 1/40. Doesn't matter. No, it's now that we're saying it's all the same shear. We're not saying that we should. 1 second. We're not saying, Vlad, that we should actually mix it. We're just saying the way you're making a remez. When people have Hasidic Torahs, they get very disturbed. They don't learn Gemara. No, I don't know one Hasidic Rebbe that made Azat Torah. In other words, it's not about we don't mix the wheat and the barley, but the concept of the numbers. That when you come to us, you add everything up together, comes out that you give 1/40. Look inside the Maraful, the 4 lines from the top, the last big line above the Gemara, Shmuel Amar. Lafaresh divrei hatana kama. All of this is to come, not to the Beis Shammais. Where do you get that from? Hainu taima hoyel v'chol truma tzarich liyeshavin. So lama amar kra. That's a good kasher. Kan by the wheat it says shishisem. You give a 6th. The kan when it comes to the barley. I'm sorry, shishisem means 2/6. By the barley, 2/6. And by the wheat, it says shishis, eloloi melach, 10 shishis al shishisem. Saruf hachol biyachad, both the chitim and the so'idim. So you have really, it's a 6th and a 6th and a 6th, right? Hagimel shishis, nimsa magia, that when you're separating 3/6 total to the total of 2 chaimers, that comes out Echad ma'arboim. Okay. And that's the source of the shear of the Ayin Yafa. Okay, no, gewaldig. Now let's go weiter. Beinanis, Echad mechamishim. Let's go, where do we get a source for that? So here we're going already to a pasuk in Chumash. In Parshas Matis, after the Torah records the victory that we have over the Minyanim, and the Torah speaks in great detail about the division of the loot of the booty that we took. So the Torah writes that regarding from the part that was given to the Levium, no. We took from the part that the Yidden got, they needed to give a part to the Levium. Just to know that's the pshat. The percentages that we're talking about, because they divided the loot, half to the warriors, half to the rest of the people. That was division number one. And the Torah writes all the numbers. And then the Torah writes that from the half that was given to the Yidden, we needed to give a certain percent to the Levium. Again, that's why I'm saying it's a drasha. The pshat is we're speaking about giving a certain part to the Levium. Here we're saying it's a remes to truma. And what does it say over there? Umimachtzis b'nei Yisrael, from the half that was given to the Yidden, tikach, you should take echad. Now the Torah could have said echad min hachamishim. What does it say? Echad achus. What does the word achus means? The word achus means that which you are grabbing, that which you are taking. So even though the Torah there is speaking about giving from the half that was given to the Yidden, that the Yidden took 1 of 50, the added word achos is being merames, that in other areas where there is an achiza, which is truma gedola, where the owner is going to be taking out from the pile, what should he give? Echad mechamishim, koil sha'ata oiches mimarkem acher. Not only for this one-time victory over the minyanim, and that is referring to a given truma gedola, because we don't know the percent. By meiser is mei eser. Meiser we know means 10%. What's truma? Harei hu kazeh, which is ma zeh echad mechamishim af ma sha'at oiches mimachem acher. When you are drawing forth elsewhere, apart from your produce to give to the kohen, harei hu kazeh, beautiful. So that's the source. That's the asmachta for the shear of echad mechamishim. Hold on, we're missing now the 1 of 60. Now this is already easy because since it says v'shishis ha'efar mechomer hachitim, 1/6 of an ephah for a chomer of wheat. What's a 1/6 of an ephah? A 1/6 of an ephah, like we just said, is a half a saw. A half a saw is a 60th of a chomer. In other words, it's almost like the Gemara is saying, if Hashem wanted to tell you echad ma'arboim, why not speak straight? Why do you have to speak about 1/6 of a chomer of wheat, 2/6 of a chomer of barley? Put it all together, zog normal, because the Torah wants to be meramas 2 things. First, put it all together to get to the share of echad ma'arboim, and then the Torah speaks lechatchila about the 1/6 of the 1/6 of the chomer of wheat is a 60th. So what we have is we have the share of echad mishishim. That's Shmuel. Now that we have that, now we got to figure out Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says, I know Beis Shammai in the Mishnah only spoke about echad mishloishim. Now we already learned that Asherilio, that quarter to Tosefta, that Beis Shammai holds that the Beinanis is echad marboim. For that we have a source for Beis Shammai. What's the source of echad me'arboim? The putting them together, the shishis and shishisim. We have the Beis Shammai.
Echad mechamishim, no?
Echad mechamishim is from the echad ochus mechamishim. The shear of echad me'arboim, the shear of echad me'arboim is, if you would do the math, Vlad did the math, we're relying on him. The Gemara did the math. We can do better. Relying that when you put together the 1 of 6 and the 2/6 and they come the 1 from 40. No, the only thing the Gemara now also the only thing that the Gemara has to give you a source for is only for the ayin toiva of Beis Shammai. For the ayin beinanis and the ayin ra, Beis Shammai can use the same asmachta that we had until now. So what will be the source? Mishloishim. He says Gavaldik. What's the echad mishloishim? You got it. Here also. Again, the Torah divides. From wheat is a 1/6. By the barley, the Torah says vishishisem. Chaychte nivrit shishiyot 2/6. Okay, Ran is machlekes shishitayim.
It's not time, 2 years.
your kid adamantly argues with
His
you.
mom,
B'chlal not.
his mom is an immigrant.
You're an immigrant, you live in America, you lost it. Okay. And that is Gavaldik. And now, what the Rashi really quoted, the Gemara is speaking of. Beinanis lebeishamai. Everything is a notch. Beinanis is marboyim. Where does he get it? Min hadad Shmuel. Put them together. Put the shishis and the shishisem. And v'hara mechamishim from Rabbi Levi from the Achos. Gavaldik. And now, Firto is the Gemara. Now that we have all of the Shiurim. Omar, not the Omar. Omar Rab Levi Barchina. Kol hamoitzi masroisov ketiknam. Whoever will separate their meisness properly, einoi mafsid klum, will lose nothing. Which means that the pile will grow back to the original size. And my tama means what's the source? When it says Vaited in Yecheskel, now this is Mem Hey Yud Aleph, and I'm going to go take a look inside the Torah Yerushalmi. Ha'efa v'habas toichen echad yia loseis meiser achomer habas v'asiris achomer ha'efer el achomer yia maskuntoi. So when it says that v'asiris achomer ha'efa el hachomer yia maskuntoi, what we're saying over here is that even after all of the tithes were removed, right, from the original volume, it's going to reach the chomer from which you took the shishis and the shishi and the shishisem, that it's going to come back to be its same measure as before. Gavaldik. The chomer will remain unchanged. And like we spoke on in the words of introduction, that here you see a very different attitude between the Yerushalmi. It's very different, and the Bavli. In the Bavli, again, we are familiar with it. Tainas Daftes, and in many other places. Aser, Ta'aser, right? I think it was Rabbi Yechanan, I forgot which, that Aser Bishvil Shetes Asher, which means that we are told in the Bavli that when you give Maisris, beginning with the biblical Maisris, before Maiser Ksafim, we add it, we link it to Maiser Ksafim, that not only will you not lose, you'll become wealthy. That's not what it says B'chlal here in the Yerushalmi. Here in Yerushalmi it says that when when Chazal say, just as an example, in Beitza, Daf Tezayin, I think that all of the money that you spend for Shabbos Yom Tov, it won't be deducted from what promised you on Rosh Hashanah. In other words, there's a certain amount of parnasa that we are destined to have, but there are certain expenditures that for some reason, no matter how much you spend, it won't be deducted off. This is a lot more similar to what we're learning over here. When a Yid is going to give all of the Trumas U'Maisris, says the Gemara, Eino Mafsed Klum, you won't lose. You began with the Chaymer. You removed whatever you removed. At the end, you'll come back to your same Chaymer. It's not coming from your cheshbon, it's God's money. It's amazing. It's a very different attitude. It almost sounds, I'm saying something very external, that as we went deeper into Golus, that means when we went from the Holy Land, even though Yerushalmi is not Yerushalayim, it's the north. When we went from there to Bavel, the Shaloi Lishma needed to grow. Tell a Jew, give tzedakah, and you won't lose any money. For the Yerushalmis, that's enough. If he's not losing, he's happy. The Yid in Golus has to be told, you're going to give money, you're going to become wealthy. And like that Rambam writes, the younger the maturity, the more Shaloi Lishma is needed. The greater the person, the less they need the Shaloi Lishma. So maybe they were in the level, they're not looking to become wealthy, but they don't want to, but they give away money. It's hard to part with money. So here we're telling you, you're going to do the mitzvahs, all the money will come back to you. If that doesn't work, so then in Bavel, they gave you a bigger bracha to motivate you. And Hashem should bless all of us that whether we need the motivation or not, but the brachas that we have in the Bavli should be added here to the Yerushalmi, and we should be oimid bin a big nasoyin to give tzedakah. We should do it. We should do it properly, and we should be gifted with Asher Shetes Asher, which will already